The dust of Hazel 7 never settled. It hung in the air like red mist, coating everything it touched. The mining colony had been there for 30 years, pulling rare metals from the dead planet's bones. 200,000 humans called this place home, though none of them wanted to be here. Taeyang wiped the dust from his work terminal and frowned at the numbers on his screen. The extraction rates were down again. The machinery was old, breaking more often than it worked. He was an engineer, good at fixing things, but even he could not make ancient equipment run forever. His supervisor would not care about excuses. The Ascended Ones wanted their tribute, and the tribute had to be paid. Everyone knew about the Ascended Ones. They ruled the galaxy, all 40,000 inhabited worlds. People called them gods because they could do things that seemed impossible. They could move through walls, appear in 2 places at once, and live for millions of years. 3 million years ago, they had been normal beings called the Velthari. Then they found a way to become something more, something immortal, something powerful. After they changed, they made the rules. All the other species in the galaxy had to obey. Worship them. Pay tribute. Never build weapons that could threaten them. Break the rules and your entire species would die. It was simple. It was absolute. It had been this way for as long as anyone could remember. Taeyang stood and stretched. His back hurt from sitting too long. He was 32 years old, lean and tired, with dark hair that fell into his eyes. He had been born on Earth but came to Hazel 7 with his parents when he was young. They died in a mining accident. He stayed because leaving cost money he did not have. Outside his small office, the mining facility stretched into the distance. Massive drills bit into the ground. Conveyor belts carried ore to processing plants. Thousands of workers moved between the machines like insects. The sky above was the color of rust. Taeyang's communicator buzzed. It was Hana. She worked on the other side of the colony, digging in old ruins instead of mining ore. She was a xenoarchaeologist, which meant she studied dead civilizations. Hazel 7 had been home to someone else before humans arrived. Hana wanted to know who they were. Taeyang, I need you to come here. Her voice crackled through the device. She sounded excited. I found something. Something big. He looked at his terminal. The broken machinery. The angry supervisor. Then he looked at the door. I will be there in 20 minutes, he said. The ruins sat on the edge of the colony, where the red desert met broken stone buildings that had been old before humans learned to make fire. Hana had been excavating one particular structure for 6 months. It was underground, sealed beneath layers of rock and time. When Taeyang arrived, Hana was standing in front of a newly opened doorway. She was 28, sharp-eyed and determined, covered in dust and sweat. Her father was Doyen, the colony governor. She could have had an easy life, but she chose to dig in the dirt instead. Look at this, she said, pulling him through the doorway. Inside was a chamber. The walls were covered in symbols that glowed faintly in the darkness. In the center of the room stood a pedestal, and on the pedestal was a data device. It looked ancient but intact. This is from the predecessor civilization, Hana said. Her hand shook as she touched the device. The people who lived here before the Ascended Ones rose to power. I have been trying to access this for hours. I finally got it working. She activated the device. Images appeared in the air, projected by technology that should not still function. The images showed beings that looked similar to the Ascended Ones. But these beings were different. They were solid, mortal. Velthari. The recording was in an old language, but the device translated. A Velthari scientist spoke, her voice thin and distant across millions of years. We have done it. We have found the way to transcend mortality. The eternal matrix will make us gods. But I must record this warning. The process has weaknesses. The link between our consciousness and the matrix can be broken. If someone discovers how we will become mortal again, I hide this information because I fear what we are becoming. We will have too much power. We will forget what it means to struggle, to die, to be truly alive. The recording ended. The chamber fell silent. Taeyang stared at the empty air where the images had been. His mind raced. The Ascended Ones were not truly invincible. They had a weakness. If someone could break their link to the eternal matrix, they would become vulnerable. We have to report this, Hana said, but her voice was uncertain. Report it to who? Taeyang asked. The colonial authorities. They will report it to the Ascended. This is forbidden knowledge. They will destroy it, maybe destroy us too. Hana knew he was right. The Ascended Ones did not allow anyone to study their origins. It was heresy. Species had died for less, but she had already sent a preliminary report. She had been excited, not thinking clearly. The transmission had gone through the colonial network before she realized the danger. 30 minutes later, the sky changed. Everyone in the colony looked up. The red sky tore open and light poured through. Not normal light. This light sang and twisted and made people want to fall to their knees. Those who looked directly at it went blind. An Ascended One was coming. Alarms screamed across the colony. People ran in every direction, panicking. No one had seen an Ascended One in person for decades. They ruled from a distance through servants and technology. When they appeared in person, it meant something terrible was about to happen. The light took shape. It became a being that hurt to perceive, existing in too many dimensions at once. It was beautiful and horrible and vast. When it spoke, the words appeared directly in everyone's mind. I am Radiant Silence. I oversee this sector. I have detected heresy. The colony of Hazel 7 has accessed forbidden knowledge. According to the Great Compact, this requires sterilization. All life on this world will be erased. Panic turned to terror. People screamed. Parents grabbed their children. Workers abandoned their posts. 200,000 people realized they had minutes to live. Taeyang stood in the central plaza, watching the Ascended One hover above the colony like a star that had fallen from the sky. His mind worked frantically. The predecessor records had shown him something. The Ascended Ones connected to the eternal matrix through quantum links. If someone could disrupt those links even for a moment, he ran to the nearest network terminal. His fingers flew across the controls. He was an engineer. He understood systems, networks, code. The colony's quantum network was dying, overwhelmed by the Ascended One's presence, but it still functioned. Barely. Taeyang pulled up the predecessor data that Hana had transmitted. He studied the technical specifications, the mathematics, the quantum signatures. Then he did something insane. He tried to hack a god. His code shot through the network, seeking the quantum signature of Radiant Silence. He found it vast and complex and perfect. He threw disruption algorithms at it, based on the predecessor information. Most of them did nothing. Some of them evaporated on contact. One of them worked. For exactly 3.7 seconds, Radiant Silence's connection to the eternal matrix flickered. The god's presence wavered. The light dimmed, and in that moment the Ascended One felt something it had not felt in 3 million years. Surprise. The connection restored. Radiant Silence turned its attention to Taeyang. The engineer stood alone in the plaza, every person in the colony watching as a god focused its infinite attention on one small human. How did you do that? The voice in his mind was no longer distant and formal. It sounded curious. Taeyang's mouth was dry. His heart hammered in his chest. But he had gone too far to stop now. He spoke out loud, his voice carrying across the silent plaza. You are not gods. You are just old. And everything old can be broken. The silence that followed felt like the end of the world. Then Radiant Silence did something unexpected. It laughed. The sound was like stars colliding. Interesting. No mortal has affected me in millennia. You have my attention, human. What is your name? Taeyang, Taeyang. I could erase you and your species from existence for what you have done. But I am curious. I will make you a wager instead. The god descended closer, its light washing over the colony. You claim everything old can be broken. Prove it. You have 1 year to develop a method to defeat an Ascended One in direct confrontation. If you succeed, humanity will be granted independence from our empire. If you fail, your species across all worlds will be marked for correction. We will reduce you to animals, incapable of thought or defiance. Taeyang felt the weight of every human eye on him. 200,000 on this colony. Billions across the galaxy. If he refused, Radiant Silence would sterilize Hazel 7 immediately. If he accepted, he might doom his entire species. He thought about his parents, dead in the mines. He thought about all the people who lived and died under the Ascended Ones, never free, never their own masters. He thought about what the predecessor scientist had said, her warning across time. I accept, Taeyang said. The galaxy would never be the same. News traveled faster than light through the quantum relay networks. Within hours, every inhabited world in the Empire knew about the wager. A human had challenged an Ascended One. Most people thought Taeyang was a fool who would doom his species. Some thought he was the bravest person alive. Everyone watched to see what would happen next. Taeyang sat in Governor Doyen's office, surrounded by people who wanted to help or tell him he was insane. Doyen himself was a careful man in his 60s, gray-haired and worried. His daughter Hana stood beside Taeyang, refusing to let him face this alone since her transmission had started everything. "You need a team," Doyen said. "You cannot do this by yourself." "I know," Taeyang replied. He had not slept in 36 hours. His mind kept circling the same impossible problem. How do you kill a god? I need specialists. People who understand things I do not. Hana pulled up a list on her terminal. I have been researching. There are people across the empire who might help. Scientists, soldiers, engineers. Most of them are in trouble with the Ascended for one reason or another. The first person they recruited was Jiho. He was a bioengineer, 40 years old, brilliant and unstable. He had been exiled from his home world for conducting illegal genetic experiments. He lived on a station on the edge of civilized space doing research that nobody wanted to talk about. When they contacted him, his response came back immediately. I have been waiting for someone to fight back. When do we start? The second was Minseo. She was a former military tactician from the dissolved Earth Defense Corps. 20 years ago, she had led a small rebellion against the Ascended. It failed. Most of her soldiers died. She survived but lost her will to fight. She spent her days on a farming colony trying to forget. Hana found her and told her about the wager. Minseo stared at them for a long time. She was in her 50s, hard-faced and scarred. I watched good people die fighting gods, she said. Why would I do it again? Because this time we have a chance, Taeyang said. He showed her the predecessor records, the proof that the Ascended had weaknesses. Minseo studied the information. Her eyes grew sharp again, the way they must have looked before she gave up. 1 year is not enough time, but I will help you try. The third was Kyung-min. He was a quantum physicist who had spent his career developing theories about higher dimensional beings. Most scientists thought he was crazy. His theories suggested ways to disrupt entities that existed across multiple dimensions. He had never tested his ideas because testing them would require confronting an Ascended one. When they explained the wager, Kyung-min actually smiled. He was young, only 25, thin and intense. I have been building theoretical models for years. Now I get to see if they work. This is the best day of my life. The fourth was Soman. She was a pilot and a smuggler, 33 years old, confident and dangerous. She ran illegal goods through sectors controlled by the Ascended, always one step ahead of their servants. She had connections to underground networks across dozens of worlds. More importantly, she had no fear of authority. You need someone who can get you places you should not be, she said when they met, and someone who can fly you out when everything goes wrong. I am that person. Plus, I hate gods. With the team assembled, they gathered in a hidden facility beneath the Hazel 7 colony. Doyen had given them access to secure rooms where they could work without being watched. They had 1 year, 365 days to do something that had never been done before. Hana spread the predecessor records across their screens. We need to understand how the ascension process works. The Velthari transformed themselves into the Ascended ones by linking their consciousness to something called the Eternal Matrix. It is a pocket universe where thought becomes reality. They anchored themselves to it while leaving physical form behind. Kyungmin studied the data, his eyes bright with excitement. The connection is maintained through quantum entanglement. The Ascended exist in real space, but their true consciousness is in the Matrix. If we sever that connection, they would be forced back into normal space. They would become vulnerable. For how long? Minseo asked. She was already thinking tactically, planning an attack that did not exist yet. Seconds. Maybe a minute if we are lucky. Kyungmin pulled up calculations. The problem is creating a field strong enough to disrupt quantum entanglement on that scale. We would need energy sources beyond anything humanity has. Jiho leaned forward. We also need a way to pin them in place. The Ascended can move between dimensions. If we attack, they will just leave. Dimensional anchors, Hana said. She had found references to them in the predecessor records. Devices that can lock a being into a single plane of reality. The predecessors built them before the Ascension, probably as a safeguard. Do any still exist? Taeyang asked. Someone grinned. I know where one is. Fortress world called Kaleth 9. It is in a vault, guarded by the devoted. They are fanatics who worship the Ascended. Getting past them will be hard. Then that is our first mission, Minseo said. She was already planning the assault in her mind. 3 weeks later, they approached Kaleth 9. Someone piloted their ship, a stolen military vessel she had renamed Defiant Dawn. It was fast and armed, though nothing they had could really threaten an Ascended one. Kaleth 9 orbited a blue star. The planet's surface was covered in temples and fortifications. Millions of devoted lived there, dedicating their lives to serving the gods. The vault they needed to reach was deep underground beneath layers of security and true believers. This is insane, Jiho said, checking his equipment for the 10th time. They all wore combat gear, weapons that seemed pathetic given what they were trying to accomplish. Everything we do from now on will be insane, Taeyang replied. His hands were steady, though fear sat cold in his stomach. He was an engineer, not a soldier. But he was learning. Minseo led them down. She had brought 20 volunteers from the underground resistance, people who had been waiting for a chance to strike back. They landed in a remote area and approached the vault through ancient tunnels. The fighting started almost immediately. The devoted were well-armed and absolutely committed. They believed protecting the Ascended's property was a holy duty. They did not surrender. They did not retreat. Minseo's tactical training kept them alive. She positioned fighters at choke points, used diversions, and pressed forward with brutal efficiency. But people died. Taeyang watched a young woman, barely 20, take a blast meant for him. She fell without a sound. "Keep moving," Minseo shouted. There was no time to mourn. They reached the vault. Taeyang worked on the locking mechanism while the others held the entrance. Energy weapons flashed in the darkness. The air smelled like burned metal and blood. His fingers moved across the control panel, bypassing ancient security systems. The vault opened. Inside was a device the size of a human fist, crystalline and complex. The dimensional anchor. Taeyang grabbed it and they ran. Salmon brought Defiant Dawn down through heavy fire. The ship's hull screamed as weapons tore into it. She flew like she was possessed, threading through defensive platforms and incoming missiles. Half their team did not make it back to the ship. They escaped Kaleth 9, but barely. Jiho had been shot in the leg, the wound serious. They had lost good people, and they had one device when they would likely need several, but they had proven something important. Mortals could steal from gods. Back at their hidden facility, Jiho recovered slowly. He refused strong painkillers, saying they made his mind fuzzy and he needed to think clearly. He worked from his bed, developing theories about biological weapons as backup plans. Hana continued decoding predecessor records, finding more information about the ascension process and its weaknesses. Kyungmin built theoretical models of the weapon they would need, calculating energy requirements and quantum field dynamics. Minseo trained more volunteers, preparing for larger operations. Soman made contacts across the underground networks, gathering intelligence and resources. Taeyang coordinated everything, barely sleeping, running on determination and stimulants. He had nightmares about the people who died on Kaleth 9. He woke up remembering their faces. 6 months into the year, they had a breakthrough. Kyungmin finished his design for the Severance Engine, the weapon that could disrupt an Ascended One's connection to the Eternal Matrix. It was massive, requiring an entire ship to carry it. The energy needs were enormous. "We need materials that only exist in stellar cores," Kyungmin explained, "and an energy source capable of powering a quantum decoherence field across 10,000 kilometers. Where do we get these things?" Taeyang asked. Soman had already found the answer. There is a stellar harvesting platform orbiting a blue giant in the Nexus sector. Automated facility. It extracts exotic matter from the star's outer layers. Everything we need is there. "Then we go there," Minseo said. But they were not the only ones paying attention anymore. Word of their activities had spread. Some Ascended Ones were amused. Others were not. As Defiant Dawn approached the harvesting platform, space itself twisted. Another Ascended One appeared, this one called Eternal Tide. It was less curious than Radiant Silence and more angry. "You have violated sacred facilities and stolen holy artifacts," Eternal Tide's voice thundered in their minds. "Radiant Silence may find you entertaining. I find you offensive. The god attacked. 17 support crew members died in the first seconds. The ship's systems screamed as reality bent around them. Soman fought the controls, trying to keep them alive. Kyungmin did something desperate. He activated his quantum implants. experimental devices he had installed to better understand higher dimensions. He pushed them far beyond their design limits, making himself visible to eternal tide across multiple planes of existence. He became a decoy, drawing the gods' attention. The implants burned out, searing through his neural pathways. Kyungmin screamed. But the distraction worked. Salmon flew them into the harvesting platform's shield envelope, where even a god hesitated to follow without risking damage to valuable equipment. They grabbed the materials they needed and ran. Eternal Tide did not pursue, but Kyungmin was badly hurt. His brilliant mind was damaged, parts of it simply gone. When he woke up in the medical bay, he could still think, but not like before. His genius was diminished. He cried when he realized what he had lost. "You saved us," Taeyang told him. "You are a hero." "I am broken," Kyungmin whispered. They had the materials. They could build the severance engine. But the cost kept rising, measured in pain and lives and pieces of themselves they could never get back. The galaxy watched and waited to see if mortals could truly challenge gods. 8 months had passed since the wager began. The hidden facility beneath Hazel 7 had transformed into something between a laboratory and a war room. Screens covered the walls, showing calculations, star maps, and timelines. The severance engine was taking shape in the construction bay, a massive device of crystalline matrices and quantum field generators. Taeyang had changed too. He was thinner now, his eyes shadowed from too little sleep and too much responsibility. He stood in front of the partially completed weapon, trying to understand if it would be enough. In 4 months, he would face radiant silence. Either the weapon would work, or humanity would be reduced to mindless animals across 1,000 worlds. Hana approached him, carrying data tablets. She had been working without rest, pushing through the predecessor records for every scrap of useful information. "I found something else," she said. Her voice was tired but excited. "More detail about how the eternal matrix functions." She projected the information into the air between them. It showed complex mathematical structures, quantum probability fields, and something that looked almost biological. The matrix is not just a pocket universe. It is alive in a way. It learns, it adapts. When the Velthari connected to it, they became part of something larger than themselves. Taeyang studied the projection. "What does that mean for us?" "It means the Ascended Ones are not separate individuals anymore. They are nodes in a vast network. When we attack one, we might be attacking all of them." Hana looked worried. "If the Matrix perceives us as a threat, every Ascended One in the galaxy might come for us." In the corner of the room, Kyungmin sat at a workstation. His hands moved slowly across the controls, not with his old speed, but with careful precision. The damage to his brain had not healed. It never would. But he refused to stop working. He had adapted, finding new ways to think through problems even if he could not calculate as fast. "The weapon design accounts for this," Kyungmin said. His speech was slower now, each word chosen deliberately. "We are targeting the connection, not the matrix itself. Like cutting a single wire instead of destroying the power station. The other Ascended will notice, but the disruption will be localized." "Will it be enough?" Taeyang asked. "I do not know," Kyungmin admitted. "My calculations show it should work. But I am not what I was. I might be wrong." Minseo entered the room, her combat gear dusty from training exercises. She had been drilling volunteers constantly, preparing them for the final confrontation. "We need to talk about the battle plan," she said. "Even if the weapon works, radiant silence will not just stand there. We need a way to keep it in place long enough for the severance engine to complete its cycle." "The dimensional anchors," Somin said, appearing behind Minseo. The pilot had been away for 2 weeks, making dangerous runs to gather more equipment. She looked exhausted but satisfied. "I found 3 more. Cost me every favor I had, but I got them." Minseo nodded approvingly. 4 anchors. We can create a containment zone. But deploying them without the Ascended noticing will be difficult. "We do it during the initial engagement," Minseo said, already visualizing the tactics. "Hit hard. Make it look like a desperate attack. Deploy the anchors while its attention is focused on our main force. Once they activate, we trigger the severance engine." "A lot of people will die in that desperate attack," Jiho pointed out. He was fully recovered from his leg injury now, but he walked with a slight limp. He had been working on backup plans, weapons, and strategies if the severance engine failed. Some of his ideas were brilliant. Some were horrifying, yes, Minseo said simply. She had made peace with that reality long ago. War has costs. Everyone who volunteers knows the risks. Taeyang felt sick. He was an engineer. He fixed machines. Now he was planning an operation that would kill people, and he was the one who had to give the orders. There has to be another way. There is not, Minseo said, not unkindly. You accepted the wager. Now you have to see it through. People will die. The only question is whether their deaths will mean something. That night, Taeyang could not sleep. He walked through the facility, past rooms where volunteers slept or worked or prepared for what was coming. These were people from dozens of worlds, dozens of species, not just humans. Word of the wager had spread and others wanted to help. They were tired of the Ascended Ones, tired of being treated as lesser beings. He found Hana in the archives, still working. She looked up when he entered, and for a moment neither of them spoke. They had been growing distant, the weight of responsibility pushing them apart even as they worked toward the same goal. Do you think this is worth it? Taeyang asked. All these lives we are risking? Hana was quiet for a while. I think about the predecessor scientist, she finally said. The one who left the warning. She knew what her people were becoming. She knew they would have too much power. But she could not stop it. Maybe we can do what she could not. Or maybe we will just make things worse. The Empire is stable. People live. If we destroy that, what comes after? I do not know, Hana admitted. But I know that living on your knees is not really living. My father taught me that. He spent his whole life obeying, keeping people safe by surrendering to every demand. He is not happy. None of us are. Before Taeyang could respond, alarms screamed through the facility. Someone was breaking through their security. They ran to the command center, where screens showed an impossible sight. Radiant silence was there. The Ascended One materialized in the main construction bay, its presence distorting cameras and sensors. Everyone in the facility felt its attention, vast and crushing. But it made no hostile moves. It simply observed the partially completed Severance engine. Taeyang ran to the bay, his heart pounding. When he arrived, he found Radiant Silence examining their weapon with what might have been curiosity. The god's form was less overwhelming than before, perhaps restrained to avoid damaging the equipment. Impressive. Radiant Silence's voice resonated directly in Taeyang's mind. You have made real progress. I did not think you would get this far. Have you come to stop us? Taeyang asked. He was afraid, but he kept his voice steady. No, I came to talk. Privately. The god's attention focused on Taeyang, and suddenly, they were elsewhere. Not physically, mentally. They stood in a space that was not a space where thoughts took form. I need you to understand something, Radiant Silence said. Here in this mental space it took a form more comprehensible, a tall figure of light and shadow. The wager is not what you think it is. Then what is it? We are dying, Taeyang. Not quickly, not obviously, but the Ascended Ones are dying. The god's form flickered. Immortality is a poison. We have lived so long that existence has lost meaning. We do nothing because we can do anything. We feel nothing because we have felt everything. We are becoming hollow. Taeyang stared at the being that claimed to be a god. Why tell me this? Because I want you to succeed. When you challenged me, when you disrupted my connection for those few seconds, I felt something I had not felt in millions of years. Fear, pain, surprise. I felt alive. Radiant Silence moved closer. I have been pushing events to reach this point. The wager was my idea. I want to see if mortals can truly threaten us, not to destroy you, but to give us purpose again. You are using us, Taeyang said, anger rising in his chest. All of this, the people who have died, you manipulated it all just to feel something? Yes, Radiant Silence said without shame. Does that change anything? You still need to win. Your species still hangs in the balance. The only difference is that now you know one of the gods wants you to succeed. The mental space dissolved. Taeyang was back in the construction bay, standing alone while Radiant Silence had vanished. His team rushed to him asking if he was hurt, what had happened. He told them everything. Jiho was furious. It has been playing with us from the start. We are just entertainment. Maybe, Minseo said thoughtfully, but it does not matter. The wager is real. The threat to humanity is real. We continue. She is right, Hana said. Whatever the Ascended's motivations, we still have to win. Taeyang nodded slowly. His mind was racing, processing everything Radiant Silence had told him. The gods were dying. They wanted conflict to feel alive again, and if the humans won, it would not end with one battle. It would start a chain reaction across the galaxy. But Kyungmin raised another concern. If Radiant Silence has been manipulating events, what else has been arranged? What if the weapon fails because it wants a better show? What if it lets us get close and then crushes us at the last second? No one had an answer to that. The final 4 months of preparation passed in a blur. The Severance engine was completed, installed aboard Defiant Dawn along with additional power generators and shield systems. The ship had been transformed into a flying weapon platform, every system optimized for one purpose. Volunteers continued to arrive. The underground resistance sent ships and fighters. Other species contributed technology and expertise. The Scattered Path, the secret network of scholars and heretics, provided ancient weapons from a dozen civilizations. Everyone wanted to see if mortals could stand against gods. Minseo trained them all, creating a fleet from the scattered resistance. They were not professional soldiers. They were miners, farmers, engineers, pilots who had decided they would rather die fighting than live kneeling. 300 ships, thousands of volunteers, all of them ready to face the impossible. Jiho completed his backup plans. He had created biological weapons, viral agents that could attack ascended biology if they became mortal. He also developed something else, a kind of antimatter payload that could be delivered by suicide ships. If the Severance engine fails, we still have options, he said. Hana archived all the predecessor records, copying them to secret locations across the galaxy. If we fail, someone else needs to be able to try again, she explained. This knowledge cannot die with us. Soman prepared Defiant Dawn for its final mission. She knew the ship might not survive. She had flown it for years, and saying goodbye to it felt like losing a friend, but she did not complain. She just made sure every system was perfect. Taeyang stood at the center of it all, coordinating, planning, trying to think of everything that could go wrong. He barely recognized himself anymore. The engineer who had just wanted to fix machinery was gone. In his place was someone harder, someone who could send people to die for a cause. 2 weeks before the final confrontation, they received a message from Governor Doyen. Hana's father was dying. He had been sick for months but had hidden it, not wanting to distract them. Now he had only days. Hana went to him. Taeyang went with her. They found Doyen in his simple quarters, thin and gray but still clear-headed. I am proud of you, he told his daughter. Both of you. You are doing something I never had the courage to do. We might fail, Hana said, holding his hand. Then you will fail having tried. That is better than dying safe and obedient. Doyen looked at Taeyang. Take care of her and win. Show them that we are more than they believe. He died 3 days later. They buried him in the red dust of Hazel 7, and then they went back to work. There was no time for grief. The deadline was coming. 1 year. 365 days. The deadline had arrived. Taeyang stood on the bridge of Defiant Dawn, looking at the empty space where they would face Radiant Silence. The dead zone of Koresh stretched before them, a region where nothing lived. Long ago, another civilization had existed here. The Ascended Ones had erased them completely for some forgotten offense. Now only dust and debris remained, floating in the darkness. Behind Defiant Dawn, 300 ships waited in formation. They were not military vessels. Most were converted cargo haulers, mining ships, even civilian transports that had been armed with whatever weapons they could carry. The volunteers aboard them came from 40 different species. They had come to witness history or die trying. Hana stood beside Taeyang, her face calm despite the fear he knew she felt. Minseo was at the tactical station, coordinating the fleet. Soman sat at the pilot controls, her hand steady on the controls. Jiho was in the weapons bay, preparing his various terrible surprises. Kyungmin worked at the engineering station, monitoring the Severance engine that filled half the ship. All ships report ready, Minseo announced. Her voice was professional, betraying nothing of what she must be feeling. She had led soldiers to death before. She would do it again. Taeyang activated the fleet-wide communication. His words would reach every ship, every volunteer who had come to this place. In a few minutes, we will face an Ascended One in direct combat. Most of you will probably die. I wish I could promise otherwise, but I will not lie to you. What I can promise is that your sacrifice will matter. Today we prove that mortals can challenge gods. Today we show the galaxy that no power is absolute, no tyranny is eternal. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being brave. He closed the channel. His hands were shaking. He had sent people to die with words. He wondered if he would ever forgive himself. Radiant silence is coming, Kyungmin announced. His damaged mind still worked well enough to read the sensors. Massive quantum distortion detected. The space in front of them tore open. Light poured through, the kind of light that did not belong in normal reality. It sang and twisted and made people want to look away. Those who looked directly at it felt their minds strain trying to comprehend what they saw. Radiant silence emerged into real space. It was vast, existing in more dimensions than human senses could perceive. The being's form was beautiful and terrible, constantly shifting between states of matter and energy. It was a star compressed into the shape of consciousness. It was thought-given power. It was everything mortals feared when they looked at the sky and wondered what gods might be watching. I am here. The god's voice filled every mind in the fleet. You have had your year, Taiyang. Show me what mortals can do. Minseo did not wait for orders. All ships, attack formation beta, engage. The fleet surged forward. Energy weapons fired from hundreds of ships. Lances of coherent light that could cut through battleship armor. Missiles streaked across the darkness carrying payloads of antimatter and exotic particles. The combined firepower of 300 ships hit radiant silence simultaneously. It accomplished nothing. The god did not even move. The attacks passed through its form or were absorbed harmlessly. Radiant silence existed partially in higher dimensions. Weapons designed for three-dimensional targets could not touch it. As expected, Minseo said calmly. Phase 2. Suicide ships, you are go. 50 vessels broke from the formation. They were the smallest ships, little more than engines and explosives with volunteer pilots. They accelerated toward radiant silence at maximum speed, their crews knowing they would not come back. Radiant silence, finally noticing the attacks, reached out. Its power manifested as fields of twisted physics. Ships touched by these fields simply ceased to exist, their matter unraveling at the quantum level. 37 suicide ships died before reaching their target. 13 got through. They detonated against radiant silence in blossoms of fire and destruction. For a moment, the god's form flickered. It was forced to solidify slightly, to interact with real space to protect itself from the massive energy release. Now, Taiyang commanded. 4 ships shot forward from different angles. They were piloted by the best volunteers Zoman had trained. Each ship carried a dimensional anchor, the devices they had fought so hard to acquire. They flew through the chaos of battle, through debris and energy fields, toward the coordinates Minseo had calculated. Radiant silence noticed them too late. The anchors activated simultaneously, creating a field of quantum restraint around the god. Radiant silence tried to shift into higher dimensions to escape the trap. The anchors held it in place. For the first time, the god seemed surprised. Clever, it said. The amusement in its voice was gone. Severance engine charging, Kyungmin announced. The massive weapon hummed to life, drawing power from every generator on the ship. The air around Defiant Dawn seemed to vibrate with energy. But radiant silence was not helpless. Even anchored to real space, even unable to flee, it had power. The god struck back with fury. Its attacks were no longer casual demonstrations. They were serious attempts to destroy. Ships died. The god's power swept through the fleet like a scythe through wheat. Entire vessels vanished. Others were torn apart, spilling crew into the vacuum. The volunteer pilots scattered, trying to avoid the attacks while maintaining their formation around the anchors. Casualties are at 40%, Minseo reported. Her voice remained steady even as she watched good people die on her screens. How long until the severance engine is ready? Taiyang demanded. 2 minutes, Kyungmin said. His hands moved across the controls, managing power distribution and quantum field alignment. His damaged brain worked desperately, checking calculations he could no longer verify with his old speed. 2 minutes. Taiyang watched the casualty reports climb. 50%. 60%. Ships were dying to buy them seconds. Jiho activated his backup plan. 3 ships loaded with his biological weapons dove toward radiant silence. They were destroyed before they could deliver their payload, but they created enough distraction for the surviving fleet to regroup. Salmon flew Defiant Dawn like she had never flown before. She dodged attacks that rewrote the laws of physics, threaded through debris fields, and kept the ship alive through sheer skill and determination. Energy blasts hit their shields, overloading them. Emergency systems screamed, but she kept them moving. 1 minute, Kyungmin said. The severance engine's charge reached critical levels. The device began to warp space around it, creating a field that made reality itself feel thin. Radiant Silence realized what was about to happen. The god focused all its power on Defiant Dawn, trying to destroy the ship before the weapon could fire. Beams of pure energy struck their hull. Metal screamed and tore. Compartments decompressed. People died. 30 seconds, Kyungmin said. Blood ran from his nose. The strain of managing the weapon with his damaged mind was too much. But he did not stop. The fleet threw themselves between Defiant Dawn and Radiant Silence. Ships used their own hulls as shields. Pilots made suicide runs to distract the god. They died buying seconds, buying moments, buying the time needed for one impossible weapon to charge. 10 seconds. Taeyang gripped the command console. Around him, his team fought to keep the ship alive. Hana was at damage control, redirecting power from dying systems. Soman's hands flew across the pilot controls. Minseo coordinated the last desperate defense. Jiho had left the weapons bay and was manually sealing hull breaches. 5 seconds. The ship shuddered. A direct hit had penetrated their armor. Fire bloomed in the lower decks. Alarms screamed. They were dying. Fire, Taeyang said. Kyungmin triggered the severance engine. The weapon released its charge. A wave of quantum decoherence expanded from Defiant Dawn, a field of pure disruption moving at the speed of light. It hit the dimensional anchors and they amplified it, focusing it on the space Radiant Silence occupied. For a fraction of a second, nothing seemed to happen. Then reality broke. The connection between Radiant Silence and the Eternal Matrix shattered. The god's presence in higher dimensions was severed. It fell completely into real space, forced into a single dimension, unable to touch the power source that made it divine. Radiant Silence screamed. The sound was not physical. It was mental, emotional, a god experiencing pain for the first time in 3 million years. The being's form collapsed, solidifying into something almost physical. It still had power. Even severed from the Matrix, it was ancient and strong. But it was no longer invincible. It was no longer untouchable. It was mortal. Taeyang stared at the transformation. They had done it. They had proven the impossible. A human and his team had made a god vulnerable. But the battle was not over. Radiant Silence, now desperate, lashed out with everything it had. Its attacks were wild and destructive. More ships died. The remaining fleet, down to less than 100 vessels, pressed the attack. They fired everything they had at the wounded god. Jiho saw his moment. He had kept one ship in reserve, a small craft loaded with antimatter piloted by remote control. He sent it screaming toward Radiant Silence at maximum velocity. The ship hit the god's semi-physical form and detonated. The explosion was like a star being born. Light and heat and destruction expanded outward. The blast wave hit Defiant Dawn, throwing the ship backward. Alarms screamed. Systems failed. When the light faded, Radiant Silence still existed, but its form was damaged, flickering, struggling to maintain cohesion. The god that had ruled for millions of years was wounded. It was bleeding. It could die. Status of the severance engine? Taeyang asked. His ears were ringing from the blast. Operational, but it will take time to recharge, Kyungmin said. He slumped in his chair, exhausted. The field is holding. Radiant Silence is still cut off from the Matrix, but I do not know for how much longer. Taeyang opened a fleet-wide broadcast. His voice reached what remained of the volunteer force. We have done what no one thought possible. We have wounded a god. Now we finish this. All ships, final attack. Give everything you have. The surviving ships, damaged and dying, moved forward one last time. They fired their remaining weapons. They rammed Radiant Silence with their hulls. They died by the dozens, but they did not stop. And Radiant Silence, for all its ancient power, could not stop them all. The god's form weakened. Its attacks became erratic. It was losing. Then, impossibly, Radiant Silence began to laugh. The sound filled every surviving mind, not with anger, but with something else. Joy. The god's form stabilized. It stopped fighting back. It just floated there, damaged and mortal, and laughed. You did it, Radiant Silence said. You actually did it. I have not felt this alive in longer than your species has existed. Thank you, Taeyang. Thank you for reminding me what it means to struggle. Taeyang stood on the bridge of his dying ship, surrounded by his exhausted team, staring at a god that was now vulnerable. He had a choice to make. They could kill Radiant Silence. They had the power now. The god was mortal helpless, or they could show mercy. The galaxy watched and waited for his decision. The bridge of Defiant Dawn was silent except for the sound of damaged systems and labored breathing. Taeyang stared at the wounded god floating in space before them. Radiant silence hung there, diminished and mortal, waiting to see what the humans would do. "We can kill it," Minseo said quietly. She stood at her tactical station, her finger hovering over weapons controls. "The god is helpless. This is our chance." "It deserves to die," Jiho added. His voice was hard with anger. "The Ascended Ones have killed entire civilizations. They have enslaved the galaxy for millions of years. We end this now." Taeyang looked at Hana. She met his eyes and he saw his own conflict reflected there. They had come so far, lost so many. The easy answer would be to pull the trigger, to make sure this threat could never hurt anyone again. But Hana spoke softly. "If we kill a helpless enemy, how are we different from them? They killed because they could. Because they had power and others did not. We fought for freedom, not vengeance." "The people who died deserved vengeance," Jiho said. But his voice was less certain now. Kyungmin looked up from his console, blood still trickling from his nose. "The data we need is more important than revenge. Radiant Silence knows how the Ascension works. We could learn from it, understand it better. Maybe even find ways to free the other Ascended from the Matrix." Soman, her hand still on the pilot controls, said nothing. She just waited for Taeyang to decide. She would follow whatever choice he made. Taeyang activated the communication to Radiant Silence. "You are defeated. You are mortal. We could kill you right now and no one would blame us. The Ascended Ones have caused nothing but suffering." "True," the god replied. Its voice was different now, less vast and overwhelming. Almost humble. "I would not blame you either. But consider this. I am the first Ascended One to become mortal in 3 million years. I am data. I am proof that what you have done can be done again. If you kill me, you waste that knowledge." "You manipulated us," Taeyang said. "This entire wager was your entertainment. Yes, I will not lie about that. But does my motivation change what you have accomplished? You have freed humanity. You have proven mortals can stand against gods. What I wanted from this does not diminish what you have done." Taeyang thought about all the people who had died. The volunteers who gave everything. The young woman on Kaleth 9 who took a blast meant for him. Doyen, Hana's father, who died believing they would succeed. Jiho's sacrifice ship. The hundreds of pilots who flew into certain death to buy seconds. They died for freedom, not for revenge. "We will not kill you," Taeyang said finally. He heard Jiho's sharp intake of breath, but no one argued. "But you will answer for what the Ascended have done. You will face justice if such a thing can exist for beings like you." Radiant Silence's form pulsed with something that might have been relief. "I accept those terms." Minseo deactivated the weapons. "The severance engine is depleted. The quantum field is collapsing. Radiant Silence's connection to the Matrix will restore in approximately 10 minutes. "That is acceptable," Radiant Silence said. "I have felt mortality again." That was enough. "But before I return to what I was, you should know something. News of your victory is already spreading through the quantum networks. Every species in the galaxy knows what you have done. And my fellow Ascended are responding." "Responding how?" Hana asked. "Some are intrigued. Some are angry. Some are afraid. The unity we have maintained for so long is breaking. You have created a fracture that will spread. Change is coming, whether any of us want it or not." The god's form began to shimmer. The connection to the eternal matrix was restoring. Radiant Silence was returning to its divine state. But before the transformation completed, it spoke one last time. "You called yourself Taeyang. In your language, that means son. You named yourself well. You have brought light to a dark galaxy. I hope you survive what comes next." Then Radiant Silence was gone, ascending back into higher dimensions, leaving them alone in the dead zone with their damaged fleet and their impossible victory. The communication channels exploded with voices. Every ship in the fleet, every species represented wanted to talk, to celebrate, to mourn their dead, to process what had just happened. Taeyang let Minseo handle the coordination. He was too tired. Soman began the long process of limping back toward Hazel 7. Defiant Dawn was barely functional. Half the systems were destroyed. They had hull breaches in 12 compartments. But the ship still flew. "It would carry them home. We won," Hana said. She sounded like she could not quite believe it. "We actually won. We won the battle," Taeyang corrected. But Radiant Silence was right. What comes next will be harder. The first sign came 3 days later while they were still making repairs in deep space. A message reached them through quantum relay, broadcast from the heart of the Ascended Empire. It came from Eternal Tide, the god who had attacked them at the stellar harvesting platform. You have committed the ultimate heresy. You have struck down one of the Ascended. For this crime, humanity will be erased from existence. Every human world will burn. Your species will be remembered only as a warning to others who might think to challenge their gods. But before panic could spread, another message came. This one was from an Ascended one called Flowing Silence. The human Taiyang has proven that change is possible. I have grown weary of eternal sameness. I release the 17 species under my protection from their obligations. They are free. Let the galaxy decide its own fate. Then another message, and another. The Ascended ones were splitting, taking sides, making decisions that would reshape the galaxy. Some chose to punish humanity. Others chose to release their subjects. Still others remained silent, watching and waiting. Civil war, Minseo said, reading the reports. The Ascended ones are going to war with each other. Because of us, Jiho said. He looked overwhelmed by the implications. We knew this might happen, Hana said. We talked about it. The Empire was stable because the Ascended were unified. We broke that unity. Taeyang sat in the captain's chair, feeling the weight of responsibility crushed down on him. They had wanted freedom. They had gotten it. But they had also unleashed chaos. Species across the galaxy were rising up, fighting each other, settling old grudges. Without the Ascended to maintain order, thousands of conflicts were erupting simultaneously, and humanity was at the center of the storm. Some species saw them as liberators. Others saw them as the cause of the chaos. Everyone had opinions about what the humans should do next. When they finally reached Hazel 7, they found the colony transformed. The mining operation had stopped. People were building defenses instead, preparing for attacks that might come. Ships from Earth and other human worlds had arrived, bringing weapons and soldiers. Humanity was preparing for war, but not everyone came to fight. Some came to help. Alien species arrived, offering technology and support. The scattered path, the underground network that had helped them, revealed itself openly. They brought ancient knowledge, weapon designs, and volunteers. We are building an alliance, one of the scattered path leaders explained. She was from a species called the Veneer, tall and crystalline, species who want freedom from the Ascended. We are calling it the Coalition of Liberated Worlds. We just wanted humanity to be free, Taeyang protested. We did not mean to start a galactic revolution. Revolutions are never started by those who want them, the Veneer replied. They are started by those who refuse to accept oppression. You refused. Now others have found the courage to refuse as well. The team tried to rest, to recover from their ordeal, but there was no rest. Too many people needed them. Too many decisions had to be made. Minseo found herself training not one fleet but dozens, as freed species prepared to defend themselves. Jiho worked with alien scientists, developing new weapons and technologies. Hana archived knowledge from 100 civilizations, trying to preserve what might be lost in the coming conflicts. Salmon rebuilt Defiant Dawn, making it better, stronger. We will need it again, she said. This is not over. Kyungmin continued to deteriorate. The damage to his brain was progressive. He knew he did not have much time left, so he worked harder, spending every moment he had left solving problems, teaching others what he knew, trying to leave something behind. 1 month after their victory, radiant silence appeared again, not on Hazel 7, but in a message broadcast across the galaxy. The god's form was vast and powerful again, fully restored. But something about it had changed. There was less arrogance in its presence, more curiosity. I am radiant silence, first among the Ascended to fall and rise again. I have experienced mortality and returned. What I learned has changed me. I hereby announce my withdrawal from the governance of the galaxy. The 1700 worlds under my protection are released from obligation. They may choose their own paths. To the human Taeyang and his companions I offer my thanks. You gave me the greatest gift possible. The gift of feeling alive again. I will not forget. The message ended, and with it, the last pretense of unity among the Ascended ones collapsed completely. The gods were choosing sides. Some still clung to their power. Others, inspired or shamed by Radiant Silence's example, released their subjects. A few simply vanished, retreating from the galaxy to places unknown. The old order was dying. Something new was being born, and it was painful and chaotic and violent. "Do you think we did the right thing?" Hana asked one night. They stood on an observation platform looking at the stars. Ships moved between them, building defenses, preparing for the future. "I think we did the only thing we could," Taeyang replied. It was the same answer he always gave, because he did not know if it was right. He only knew it was necessary. "My father would be proud," Hana said softly. "He died believing we would win." He was right. "Winning was the easy part," Taeyang said. "Now we have to figure out what to do with victory." Behind them, radiant silence appeared. Not physically. The god was elsewhere, but it projected its presence, visible only to them. It had taken a new form, less overwhelming, almost humble. It had chosen a mortal name using Hana's suggestion, Huisang, faint light. "I have been studying your species," Huisang said, "trying to understand what made you different, why you refused when everyone else accepted." "We are not that special," Taeyang said. "We just got angry enough to try." "Perhaps. But anger alone does not win battles. You had something else, hope. You believed change was possible even when it seemed impossible. That is a rare quality even among mortals." "Hope does not seem very useful right now," Hana said, gesturing at the reports of conflicts spreading across the galaxy. "Look at what we have unleashed." "Growing pains," Huisang said. "The galaxy has been static for millions of years. Change was always going to be violent. But it is still change. It is still better than eternal stagnation." "Will you help us?" Taeyang asked. "You are one of them. You know how the Ascended think. We need that knowledge. I am already helping. I am teaching those who wish to learn how to defend against divine power. I am sharing the secrets of the Ascension, showing others how to become gods themselves if they choose. The Ascended ones are no longer special. We are just the first to walk this path. Others can follow. Is that wise?" Hana asked. "Creating more gods? Probably not. But the knowledge exists. Trying to suppress it would make us no better than the Ascended who tried to keep mortals ignorant. Better to share it and hope that those who ascend do so with wisdom." The former god faded, leaving them alone with their thoughts and their fears and their responsibilities. Years passed. The galaxy continued to change. Some species thrived in their freedom. Others fell to infighting and chaos. The coalition of liberated worlds grew, becoming a power in its own right. Humanity sat at its heart, not as rulers but as symbols of what was possible. Taeyang never stopped working. He helped build the coalition, trained others to defend themselves, and tried to minimize the damage the revolution had caused. He was not a hero. He was just a man who had refused to accept tyranny, and who now had to live with the consequences of that refusal. Anna continued her studies, uncovering more secrets from the predecessor civilization and other ancient cultures. Knowledge became their greatest weapon and their greatest defense. Minseo found purpose again, leading the coalition's military forces. She finally had a fight worth fighting, a cause worth dying for. She was not haunted anymore. Jiho grew old working on impossible projects, pushing the boundaries of what science could accomplish. His work saved lives and ended them in equal measure. Solman flew between worlds, carrying messages and supplies, keeping the coalition connected. Defiant Dawn became legendary, the ship that had wounded a god. Kyungmin died quietly one night, his brilliant mind finally exhausted. They buried him on Hazel 7, next to Doyun and all the others who had given everything for freedom. His last words were calculations, formulas that might lead to the next impossible thing. And Huisang, the god who had become mortal and then chose to help instead of rule, remained a strange ally, neither fully trusted but always interesting, always teaching, always reminding them that even gods could change. Taeyang stood in the memorial garden they had built for those who died in the war against the gods. Thousands of names were carved in stone. More were added every day as the conflicts continued. He touched one name, the young woman from Kaleth 9 whose name he had never learned but whose face he remembered. Was it worth it? Someone asked behind him. He turned to find a young person, barely 20, wearing the uniform of the coalition. A new generation who had grown up in the world he helped create. I do not know, Taeyang admitted. Ask me again in 100 years. Maybe by then we will know if mortals can build something better than what the gods gave us. We will, the young person said with absolute certainty, because we have something they never had. We have hope. You taught us that. Taeyang smiled, tired and old before his time. Then I hope you are right.
The galaxy is yours now.
Try not to break it. He walked away from the memorial, back toward the work that never ended. They had proven mortals could challenge gods. Now they had to prove that mortals could rule themselves. It was harder than fighting. It was slower than war. But it was the only way forward. Above them, the stars burned with the fires of change. The old order was dead. The new order was being born. And humanity stood at the center of it all, having done the impossible simply because someone had said it could not be done. They said no mortal could challenge the gods. A human disagreed, and the galaxy would never be the same.